Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jennie Johnson,
Hello, and I'm Dianne Hartshorn.
and we are super excited. We're doing something a little bit different. This leads, for me, as our listeners know, is a little more on the theatrical side, which is always fun for me. But we have three guests joining us tonight. I came across, this was a while back. I was scrolling through probably social media and came across an ad for a show called Life, a delightful show about fear and grief, in which I was super intrigued and went and looked at it. And I thought, oh, this would be so much fun to talk about on our show. So I reached out to the ladies that do this show and tried to see if we could catch them before their upcoming performance at that time. Unfortunately, the timing was just real close when I found out about it, but they still reached out. They've agreed to come on the show tonight. And so I'm excited to have them all here. And we're going to talk about their show. You'll get to know a little bit about each of them. But tonight we have three guests. It's been a while since we've had multiple guests. So we have Andrea Sodergren, Elaina McMillan, and Katie Mason joining us on the show today. So welcome, ladies.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So let's start for our audience who doesn't know. This is great because for our Denver-based listeners, this particular show is here in Denver. These ladies are all in the area, which is great. It made planning our timing tonight very easy. So often our guests are in other time zones. So this was kind of easy peasy for all of us tonight. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. We can kind of just go in a circle if you want. And then we'll talk about how you came up with the concept for this particular show and where that's led you and go from there. So we'll start with Andrea.
Great. Yeah. So I am, what about me?
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, it's always challenging. So I was, up until last year, I did Facebook and Instagram marketing, which is probably how you saw the show because I do the ads and things like that for this show. But last year I did quit my business doing Facebook marketing, and I do produce a show called Moms Unhinged. It's stand-up comedy with all mom comedians, and we're touring all over the United States. So
Fun.
Yeah, that's what I do right now, which is wild. And also do this show. And it's kind of fun because there's a lot of overlap between like what I have been doing and, kind of putting this show together too.
Very cool. Katie.
Yeah, so my background, I'm a licensed psychotherapist and I've been in private practice for like over 15 years now. And so I've got a range. I've done a lot of grief work in my practice, but I also have worked with dreams and trauma, and I've been performing, started doing stand-up about 8 or 9 years ago, but I'm more of a poet at heart, so I kind of feel anchored a little bit more in poetry, and so I weave all of that into the show.
Very cool.
The therapy stuff and the poetics.
Oh, I love that. And certainly not least, Elaina.
Let's see. I'm a hypnotist and a coach, and I've done comedy for I think it's been like 13 years now. And for me, I think the grief thing, unlike Katie, the therapist, who's done a lot of grief work, that is not generally what had come up in my hypnosis practice. And grief for me is sort of new, but I have a son struggling with addiction and a mom who has Alzheimer's. So I'm just in this sandwich that I did not order and been really immersed in grief from both sides. And so I had more of a fast track lesson in grief. Katie brings more of a steady understanding of it, but that's kind of my background. And that's, I think, how I ended up in a conversation about fear and grief.
Oh, well, this is timely. We actually just a couple weeks ago did an episode specifically about grief. Because it comes up all the time. I mean, as humans, it's something we all have to deal with at some point in our life. Like you said, Elaina, you got the sandwich you didn't order all of rolled into one, and you're dealing with multiple issues of it. But we were talking about it. I've had some stuff come up within my own family recently that we've had to address. And so I wanted to address it on our show. Mostly, I mean, we talk about cemeteries and death all the time. We don't usually deal with the more of the present stuff, like the grief that's happening now, but we mention it a lot, even in our historical episodes, the type of grief that people were going through at the time and dealing with. And so it's something that I think we need to have a lot of conversations around. What I like about this show is it does bring some of the humor to it too, and it helps relieve some of the more painful parts of grief, because that's all part of it. So, and I like that you guys have the different backgrounds, so that brings more of it out in the show. And you know, I'm sure your audience can connect with that a little bit better, because everybody's experiencing it in different ways. So I love that you've created this show that creates this conversation around grief and the fear of being in grief and the process of it. So tell us a little more about how you came up with, from going from comedy and talking about, you know, these moms who are in the comedic side of being a mom, to actually addressing fear and grief and bringing it to the stage like this, like you do.
Yeah, who wants to take that?
Don't worry, we can edit anything out too. So
all right. I'll go.
Sure.
So we had sort of known each other as comics for a while, over the last, I don't know, probably 7 years or so. We ultimately ended up coming together, and originally we had intended to do a comedy show about hard things. I mean, I think we had always had, I think all of us had our comedy always had sort of an honest, authentic vibe. But we had come together. We were looking to do a show, and it occurred to Katie that she didn't want to do a show just about comedy. She wanted to do something different. And I think Andrea and I were a little bit like, fine, fine, we'll do just this one, but then we're going to do a comedy show.
Yeah.
And we haven't stopped doing it since. And now when we go do a comedy show together, which it's come up a few times that all three of us are on the same show, and we are there's almost this like undercurrent of disappointment, like we're not even going to make anybody cry. Like it's comedy, you know, it's kind of funny, especially when the three of us are together.
Oh, I love that. Now, well, Katie, you were saying because of what you do, you know, you do a lot of grief counseling and things like that, and you're working with people who are actively, in some cases, actively in the grieving process, and maybe some that are later in life but have to get through it again. So I can understand kind of where you can build your premises. How did you take this particular subject, which is very hard and heavy, and how do you infuse the comedy into it so that it, when you're sitting up on stage talking, you don't have the audience in tears, even if you might want to?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, I think, well, with comedy, that's, if you're writing it from that place of wanting to learn to lighten something, you're sort of looking for where there's some relief in that, in the pain. So, you know, even grief pairs very well with laughter, actually, because it's a lot of tension. You know, it's like a dense topic, and so then there's a lot of tension in the energy, and so that's just kind of begging for a release of some sort. So we naturally find humor in grief most of the time, which is why, like, it's not uncommon to go to a funeral and have people laughing next to people who are crying. And if you don't expect that, because sometimes culturally we can be like, I don't know, that's not appropriate. You might judge it, but it's actually just energy releasing. So I think it's sort of natural to want to find some of the brevity or the levity in something that's dense, and it's just begging for it because it just wants to be released, that heavy energy.
Because I think sometimes the families we work with, it's either you're going to laugh or you're going to cry.
Yeah. And sometimes you do both at the same time.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
Like, what am I doing? Am I laughing or crying? I don't know. And I think sometimes a little of that energy in our show is good.
Well, but that's real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think The other thing too is just that you can't, we have done a lot of work on ourselves throughout this process to make sure that we've kind of processed our own grief that we are writing about. So you don't want to go up on stage with the grief being so raw and so just like an open wound, because the audience feels that and it's uncomfortable for them. So you have to know your point of view, know what you're trying to say about it, and make really distinct points. And it can still be very meaningful and very have so much depth, but it's not like just a trauma dump,
Which, that can be hard if that's all that is.
Mhm.
But the nice thing about what you do with the show, or at least one of the things I think, is that for somebody who's really in a tough situation, and there's a lot of, and we talked about this on our episode. Now, when we were covering grief, we mostly covered grief specific to death in this case, but we did mention that grief comes in a lot of forms for a lot of different reasons. Like Elaina said, addiction, people going through dementia. We've had that subject multiple times actually on this podcast. There's a lot of different reasons why we grieve, depending on what stage we are in life and who's around us and all of that. But what I like about what this show does, aside from adding the humor, is it probably opens the audience's eyes to realize there are other people that have dealt with the same sort of grief that they're dealing with. Sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you don't realize other people have been there too. You can't sometimes, you can only, your brain's only going to hold so much at one time before you're like, okay, I have to tune other stuff out. And so this creates a space where they're sitting next to somebody that they may not know, never met in their life, but they can all of a sudden they communicate with them like, I understand exactly what that was like. And it forms that bond for at least that little bit of time within the space of your show, realizing that they're not the only ones that had to suffer through whatever type of grief it was that they were or are dealing with or may deal with in the future.
And I think for us as women, we are expected to be the one that holds everything together. Even though everything around us is falling apart, we have to hold up our husbands. We may have to hold up our children, but then nobody is there to hold us up. So I think to actually know we're not going through this alone or other people have experienced it I think, and I listened to the trailer, which I would love to see the show because you have to have a sick sense of humor to get through some of this stuff. And just to know it's okay to laugh and to be angry and all the things that you go through, and you're not a bad person for having any of those feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
And kind of like the fact that we can bring it all into one show, it's kind of a reminder that we can hold all of these feelings at one time. I mean, I take addiction, for example. I can be sad and angry at the same time. I can have so much compassion and also have a little tantrum, like this isn't fair, all at the same time. And I think that the show kind of represents that we as humans have the capacity to hold a lot of different feelings.
And that it's okay to hold them.
Yeah.
And to what you were saying earlier, to hold them in community with other people, I think that's a lot. I mean, we're constantly being reminded, people coming up to us after the show or sending us emails later just saying it was so nice to just be in a communal space where we could talk about these things. A lot of times we end up feeling really isolated in these feelings. So to be in a public place where we're giving permission through our sharing, but also our vulnerability, but just for everybody to be in these feelings creates community, and we need more of that.
Right. And that's especially for caregivers who are grieving. You mentioned dementia in the show that you've dealt with it. And caregivers, especially, because when you're in the thick of being the caregiver and you're having to think of all the needs of the person you're caring for, plus all your own needs, plus a lot of times additional family members, like it's stacked, it's layer upon layer upon layer. You tend to isolate yourself as a caregiver, not intentionally. It's just as what happens in the process. And so to be in a room where you might find 5 other people who are or have been a caregiver that can say, I totally get it. And it's totally normal to feel the way you're feeling about it. It's not an easy thing to handle. But again, when they're in the middle of it, they don't understand that. And they don't even process it all the time. Sometimes it doesn't happen until the end later on. But caregiving is a really different type of grieving. And unless you've done it or you've actively been with somebody who's doing it, it's really hard sometimes to comprehend that. So I like that you create that community.
Yeah, there's a lot of overwhelm with caregiving.
Yeah.
And I think we're all kind of experiencing our own version of that right now.
We are. Yeah, being the kind of similar ages, we have parents and, that are in different situations, but still we're kind of having to step up and realize that, they won't be here for very long left. And we are, here to support them, but it can be overwhelming with all the other things, like you said.
Yeah. And nobody, I mean, we, again, like Dianne mentioned, especially as women, we tend to be the caregivers more often. And we put in our brains that we have to take care of everybody all the time. And you forget to take care of yourself, or you're too tired at the end of the night. You're like, okay, I'm going to go to bed. Now, do we all go to sleep right away? Probably not. We all lay there in bed and have a million things racing through our mind. And then we're mad at ourselves for not shutting it off and not getting to sleep. And it's just this vicious cycle we're going through over and over again. And it's really hard. And then there's the part that I think people get shocked by with grief the most. And I don't care what kind of grief you're going through, what the process was, but anger is a big part of grief. And I know that shocks a lot of people because they're like, I shouldn't be angry at my loved one. I shouldn't be angry about whatever. But that's natural because you're losing control of a situation, or it is out of your control sometimes. And anger is a big part of grief. And I don't think people understand that until they're in it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we address that directly in the show. I mean, we created a piece specifically to talk about anger, like very explicitly, like not in a roundabout way, but to really name how anger is a part of grief and how we express it differently between the three of us. And there isn't a right or wrong way to express anger, but it's a more challenging one for a lot of women, especially. But I think in general, it's just a more challenging emotion for people to feel, particularly related to grief, because we don't want to feel angry towards those that we're losing, or towards our losses, because it's already hard enough. So
yeah. And it's confusing then. I mean, then you're angry that you're angry.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother layer of anger. You're just like, and we've talked about this before on the show. Several years ago now, I was involved with a theatrical production that focused on dementia. It was a beautiful production, and we would do a Q&A afterwards with our audience. And we really got to know a lot of personal stories from our audience who were the caregivers of either spouses or parents, depended in different ways. But that was always one of the things where I remember talking with them, and they would say, I hated that I was angry at my dad for not being my dad anymore, because that's one of the worst parts about dementia is it takes the person away from you. And I remember them but they would say, when we watched that part of your show where there's a point in the show where the daughter gets angry, and the dad who actually has the dementia, he has a different form of anger that he expresses. And people were like, that's it. Like, somebody gets it. That's exactly what we went through when we were caring for, our loved one, and we had that anger, but then they felt so guilty for being that angry about it. But again, they were in this horrible situation that they couldn't get out of. And dementia, any form of it, is the worst, I think, out of a lot of the wasting diseases, because you lose the person as we know them, not just their body, but you're losing their personality and all the things that most about them and loved most about them. And that's what goes away. And it's so hard for everybody in that situation. So I'm so glad that's one of the the topics that you guys address in your show.
Yeah. And I would add to that, my mom's been sick for 9 years. It has been a long haul. And losing her, sitting across from her, but having it not, there's nothing familiar about her anymore, is really hard. But almost harder is the impact on my dad. Like I lost him too with her diagnosis. He has not been the same.
Right.
And that's almost more challenging because he is there. Or at least I feel like he should be there, but he has the capacity he has, just like she does. And, it's a very complicated experience. It really is.
Yeah, it's not fun. But again, you have to find those moments that make you laugh or make you smile, or, the things that lighten the mood for just a minute.
Yeah.
It may not be for a long period, but you got to have the moments to bring back a little bit of lightness.
Yeah. My mom has told me that they made her carry a dead body down the stairs. So, you just have to go with it and be like, huh, sounds heavy.
Yeah, my boss has that. Her brother, who is suffering the after effects of Agent Orange and that in Vietnam, and he's in a facility, and he's very delusional, where he thinks there's people moving into his apartment and all this stuff. And she lives out here, and he lives clear halfway across the country, but she is his main caregiver because he never had children. And so there was times at work I would watch her where it would be so, you could just see the heaviness because he's just not there. I think somebody was selling ice cream or something in his room. And then I was dealing with my mother and her caregiver, and then how the caregiver went crazy. But dealing all that, I was like, you know what? We just need to put them together in their own little place, and then they'll be fine. Because if it was like we didn't find the humor in it, we probably would have both just sat there and cried because it was nothing we could do. And that was the point. There was nothing we could do.
Yeah. But
and there's humor in it organically. I mean, like Andrea's story, it's such an unusual situation, and in some weird way it's kind of a privilege to experience it, but 9 years is a long time.
It is a long time.
It's a very long time.
Yeah. And it's just heavy. And one of the things we talk, again, this really pertains to any of the dementia, but any of the other wasting diseases where it takes years and years and you're watching somebody slowly die. There's going to be a second grieving after that, because there's almost that you're grieving while it's happening. Then they actually finally die, and then you grieve again for that part of it. And we talked a lot about how you were going through two different types of grief. A lot of people go through that situation. And again, for some people, that becomes really unexpected to have to do it twice, because sometimes they think they've come to terms with the idea of it, and then the death actually happens, and then they haven't really, because now their life has changed all over again, because the routines, all the things they were doing as a caregiver, that's now gone. They don't need to do that now. And now it's a whole different routine. And so it changes that. And then there's also just like grief from even losing a loved one, maybe not over long term, but it's coming and it's going to happen, and everybody comes to come with it, but you're still sad because this was somebody you loved and whatever. I think I've shared the story a couple times. When my husband's dad died, we knew it was coming, and we were able to, it was one of those times where we were actually able to make peace with it, and we all got to talk with him at the end, and we knew what his wishes were and whatever. But the night before, my husband and his mom and his sister were going to meet with the funeral home, and they were planning the funeral. I was laying in bed, and I just started kind of giggling to myself because I had a thought. So his dad had served in Vietnam and came home without any legs. And so all his life, my husband knew him with prosthetic legs, and he used to play pranks on the Boy Scout troop with these prosthetic legs, and he had all kinds of fun with it. So I was thinking of this story in my head that my husband had told me. And so I was like, wouldn't it be funny if we had his legs at the service and we just put flowers in them And that's exactly what we did. They were at the end of the casket. They were 1 each leg, and they were beautiful flower arrangements. And I remember during the funeral, the viewing, people walked up, and a couple of people, you saw the double takes, and they were like, "Are those his legs?" And we were like, yes, they are. But it's something he himself would have totally appreciated after all the pranks he played on the Boy Scouts with his broken legs on the middle of a hike, or whatever else. So it was one of those moments where, yes, we were all very sad and we were grieving, but it was a hilarious moment because we were remembering something that made him laugh and smile in his life, that he made the best of in his own life, out of a situation where he went off to war a completely whole man and did not come back that way. But he was one of those men who's really resilient, and he pushed through and did not let the fact that he had 2 prosthetic legs stop him ever in all of his life. And he could have, but he chose not to. So
well, that's his legacy too, where I think a lot of people feel like they have to not really do what they want, but what are people going to think if they did that, and da 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 da. And I think people need to get to the point where they need to do what they want and how they want it, and and not worry about what other people are going to think, because that's what they need to do, like you did with your father-in-law's prosthetic legs.
All I heard was legacy.
I didn't mean it that way. Oh my gosh.
It was his legacy. Yes. Yes. But the whoever did the flower arrangements did a beautiful job, like I said, and they were all red, white, and blue because he's a veteran and very proud of that. So it was great. Those were the best looking prosthetic legs ever. So and it was a great way to honor him, and something that really was a huge part of him, even though I know he didn't always like it, and he had his issues, and the legs changed over the years as technology and stuff changed. But he was one of those very determined people who wasn't going to let something like that stop him from raising his children, from participating in what his children did. He was there for all their stuff, and it was truly a part of their life. And so to be able to include that moment of laughter when we were all sad, and then of course they brought it up in the funeral. I have no idea what the funeral director thought when they mentioned it to him, because I wasn't at that meeting, but she went with it, and then they did it, so it was great. But it was a moment of laughter, in a moment, in a time when we were all really sad. So it's important, like you said, it's important to have the humor to go with the grief, to release all of that pent up energy that just
and I think humor can really add, can be, because you're just really pointing to the ridiculousness of it all, right? It's ridiculous. And even just, sometimes things about life, it's, ridiculous. And we've all had different experiences, and to be able to, point to something and point out the ridiculousness, it helps people think about other things and be able to laugh at them too, because I think it's very healing.
Oh yeah. Well, think about it. We do that with little kids, right? If they fall down and they get hurt, we try not to overreact, but then they're still upset. And so then we try and distract them with something else. And a lot of times we tell them a joke, or we're like, here, have a sucker, or whatever it is. But it's a distraction method so that we aren't stuck in that same moment, in that same bad feeling all the time, and we get out of it and we can start to move on, and it helps us heal. And it might still take a very long time, depending on what type of grieving you're going through and what you're doing, and whatever, all the other stuff that we have, because I don't know a single person in this life that doesn't have 9,000 things coming at them from every direction. So
yeah, and that's definitely one of the things that people say they get out of this show too, is just to be able to laugh at things and just feel their feelings. It's very cathartic for them, and it's just, really helpful. We just have a lot of people who come out and say they just really are amazed at how good they felt. They were worried that the show fear and grief, it sounds so heavy,
right?
But they come out and they're like, we leave them with a very light and funny, but also with a poignant part as well, that really kind of leaves people hopeful, leaves people feeling good, and really kind of coming out just having a really great experience with the show.
Where have you guys done your shows? Where?
Well, mostly we've done them at the Bug Theater. We've had, how many of our shows have been there?
That's
3?
a great location.
Probably 3 or 4.
Yeah, 3 or
I
4
don't even
shows at the
know.
Bug Theater. A couple times at the Boulder Dairy. A couple of times. Yeah, a couple of times. Oh, yeah, 3 or 4 there, probably. And then twice at Prismagic in Lakewood. Yeah, so we've really
away game in Park.
Yeah, it's like you're covering a good chunk of the Denver metro area, which I love. Now, my question for Katie was, you had mentioned at the beginning when you're telling about yourself, you really like poetry and that sort of feeling. Do you get to, with this particular topic, do you get to involve that in this show, some of your poetry, or?
Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so the show is like it's kind of cross genre in that way. We have stand-up poetry, we have stand-up comedy, we have spoken word poetry, and we have some storytelling, some letter sharing, some journal sharing. And so it's a little bit of everything. And so the poetry I love that. It's a place where I get to not only express the stand-up that I do, but the poetry that I do. And there's not a lot of places where I get to just kind of do both. So it's really, I love that about this show.
Yeah.
And I think it's perfect for the topics too, because it kind of shows the range of expression of these emotions too.
True. Yeah. And I cannot wait to see this show the next time you guys do it. I'm totally going to be there because like I said, when I was just scrolling and I saw the ad for it and I was like, oh, wait, what? And I think I remember physically scrolling back and clicking on it because I was like, I had not heard of this. And I thought, how interesting that you combine so many different elements to talk about this. Really, like you said, the title sometimes probably freaked people out, thinking we're going to go and we're going to have this really heavy conversation about death and grief and moving on, and and hear the almost like a really serious TED talk, and this is not that at all.
Well, and I'm assuming you were drawn to the ad because the photo in the ad is us walking in a cemetery.
It is,
so
yep, sure, and that probably caught my eye too.
But if you look close, we were really intentional about that image because we're also carrying a picnic basket and a champagne bottle with a couple champagne flutes. And so the idea was we're going to have a picnic at a cemetery, like, 3 people coming together with their grief, but also with the celebration of life that can only come by being present with death. And so the added details of that whole photo shoot were very intentional.
Yes, I love that picture. Did you guys do that at Fairmount?
Yes, we did.
Your cemeteries.
Till I swim in the cemeteries, just a little. I thought I recognized that section, but it's such a gorgeous picture. And you're right, it is kind of fun because of the way you're posed on the path there with the things, and you're all wearing your black dresses. But I don't know, we love Dianne and I love picnics and cemeteries anyway. But we talk about the historical connections of picnics and cemeteries because that's a very old tradition that some cemeteries have actually outlawed because they don't want to deal with the mess. But a lot of our garden cemeteries, that was part of the reason they were formed. They wanted people to come and sit at the graveside and have these meals and have these memories and have these conversations so that death wasn't as scary. And eventually, over time, when we developed a whole industry related to death, it did become actually scarier than it used to be. And now we're coming back out of that. And we're saying, okay, this doesn't have to be a scary topic. It's something we should be able to learn to grasp and get through. And so I love the fact that you guys have included all of that. But yes, that's a very awesome photo.
Well, and it was such a gorgeous night. Like it was magical in that cemetery that night. Like we just felt like how lucky are we that this is where we are right now? Because it's just it's a very sacred, beautiful cemetery, but then you get the right lighting and the right people, and suddenly it's just like it just felt like magical being there. That night.
Energy in the air. It was special.
One of those like really long sunsets. It just like goes on, and we're just like how is this like, this is so cool that we get to be doing this together in this really special place.
I think you
And I
have
think
some.
that's how we feel about the show too. Like how
Yeah.
cool is it that we get to come together and do this. It's special and it's like sacred.
I love it. And it's such a great concept that's just not being done in such a way that
Oh,
as
yeah.
often.
Well, most of the talks like that, you go and it's a lecture or it's, I mean, I've seen funeral homes that sponsor these grief courses or grief support systems, and it's probably not, I can almost guarantee it's not going to be what the three of you do. So I would, yeah, we need to do that. We need to laugh.
Well, if you know any funeral homes that want us to come do a show, we're
I know we
consideration of
joked
that.
about the mortuary tour, you know.
Yeah,
I think that's fabulous.
Mortuary tour.
Yes. You know, one of the things that I think is interesting about the show, kind of like a grief group, like the reason I think grief groups are so important is because not only does it create community, but there are enough people sharing their own stories that are unique and different that inevitably you can connect with somebody there.
Right.
And I think the three of us are very different. And what that brings to the show is three very distinct points of view and experiences. And I think almost anybody could come to the show and relate, between the three of us, relate to a handful of things going on. Because like you said, we've all got grief. We all have fears that hold us back. We can relate to this, but to actually hear somebody share a story that is so similar to yours, you've got that instant sense of connection, and you also feel seen. I mean, that's one of the things that, we talked about this with our comedy early on. Like, I want to talk about things. I want people to be able to laugh at something that isn't normally funny. But if they can relate to it and laugh at it, now they're actually laughing at something personal to them that wasn't funny. And that just creates, like, that is the gift of some space that maybe wasn't there before. And, again, the three of us, we cover a lot of ground between us. And I think community and feeling seen are probably two of the most important things for me to be able to deliver in the show. And the feedback we get says that is definitely happening.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
It does. It sounds wonderful.
Andrea, you looked like you had something you wanted to say at that point. I didn't know, or if you were just adjusting.
I was just adjusting. No,
I was thinking you were talking about, that community and feeling seen. And you think about it when you're with like maybe your own group of friends, you guys will have your little jokes that you'll tell that you may not want to say in front of people that didn't know you as well, because they'd look at you and go, that's not funny, or you shouldn't joke about that or whatever. But when you can have ladies like yourselves who are comedians as well as all the other things you do, and you know how to bring the comedy to a point where it's not going to upset somebody, but they're actually going to go, oh yeah, okay, I can do that. It's that same type of feeling. I think we all have our close group of friends where we share our little things that we think are hilarious that nobody else might find as funny, either as moms or as wives, in our careers, whatever it is. And we all are part of so many different things and this is just one more of those things, the grief process. Because again, we said at the top of the show, everybody is going to suffer some form of grief throughout their life. Some people are fortunate not to have as much as others, but everybody's going to go through it at some point in their life for some reason or other. So the fact that you can
and sometimes
relate on so many levels. Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry.
And sometimes people don't deal with it very well. They stuff it down. Like that's been my tendency, is just like, oh, just keep going. I tend to deal with fear and grief by cleaning my house. So, it's
plus side clean house.
I know, right? That is a plus, but at the same time, it's not dealing with the real feelings. So I think that's something. And one of the things that I appreciate about this show too is that we are pretty vulnerable up there. We do, I know that the first time we did the show, I was really scared to even say some of the things we're saying, because it's pretty vulnerable. And like you said, a lot of times you're sharing with your group of friends who knows you, we're in front of a bunch of people who don't know us, and we're it's scary to feel like maybe we'll be judged, or maybe we'll be people will think something about us that isn't necessarily true. So, but we've definitely gotten such good, amazing feedback. That's why we had to keep going after the first one. We were going to do it just one time. And we just everyone's like, you have to do this again. So that's what we did. And we just kept going. And now we're at, is it 15 shows? No, 11.
Wow.
Yeah. How many shows have we done? No,
12 will be
12. Wow.
Wow.
We've done 12.
That's so
shows.
amazing.
Yeah.
But obviously it's providing something that people want and need. It says, and somebody probably went and said, you need to see these ladies, you need to go see this. And now look at you guys, it's just going to keep going, which is amazing. And I love that because it is something, again, I think society is we're having a shift again, where we're starting to open up more. It's for several years now, there's been, especially on social media and stuff, there's a lot of people who are like, it's okay to talk about your feelings. It's okay to have feelings. Like, we don't have to be so stoic all the time. And we can tell people that we're upset or that we're grieving or that whatever the feelings are going to be. And again, we're coming out of a phase where for a long time that wasn't okay for a lot of people, especially in a public setting. Just put your stone face on and get through the day and it's going to be fine, but it's not going to be fine. And so I think having a show where you guys can make people laugh, and you can make them cry, and you make them think a little bit, and you make them just maybe take that deep breath and just let it out. I think that's really beneficial to a lot of people. And maybe I'm sure the three of you, like you said, feel vulnerable sometimes bringing up some of the topics and you're sticking your toe in the water, but maybe it's helping somebody who was feeling vulnerable before, that's sitting in your audience, to feel a little braver about sharing that moment, even if they don't share it with you, but going home and sharing it with somebody else or whatever. Now they've realized, I can talk about this with somebody.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to feel that way, even though, I may have thought I was a bad person from feeling that way. It's okay because I'm not the only one.
Or maybe it helped them seek counseling that they were refusing to do before or something. So I think that's fabulous that your show is probably helping a lot of people in that way. Exactly. And you aren't going to know about every single individual that came through the door and how it helped them. But I think what you're doing is probably helping a lot of that, which is fabulous. And we need a lot of that.
Definitely.
Little love, a little laughter, and a little hard reality all mixed in one. I think that's wonderful. Do you have any? So your next upcoming show that you currently know you have set in stone is going to be January 9th and 10th. So I know it's a little ways out, listeners. I'm sorry. And that one is scheduled to be at the Bug Theater, which for our Denver area people, if you've never attended a performance or a show at the Bug, you should. It's a fabulous spot to go to. I've been to several shows there and I love that one. And I will have your website linked in our show notes for our listeners, but it is fearandgrief.com. So that's at least an easier website to remember. So definitely check it out. But if you have any other shows that come up in between, let us know. We'll definitely help you guys get the word out. Do you have any last bit of advice or anything you want to leave our listeners with before we end tonight?
I don't know about advice, but one of the things that was really surprising to me is we have groupies.
Ooh, I love it.
We have people who come, I don't know if groupies is the right term, but we have people who come to almost all of the shows. And it's so interesting because I think I would have thought that it just was something that people wouldn't want to see more than once. I mean, I drag my husband to all of the shows, and he swears that he wants to, but I just find it really interesting that there are people that will, and we do add new pieces all the time. I mean, honestly, I don't even know that we've ever had two shows that have been the same.
Oh, that's great.
So that's, I think that makes it more interesting. But I was very surprised that people wanted to continue to see the show with regularity.
Oh, cool. I love that. But again, obviously you're doing a great thing because they come back over and over again. So, which we like, and that keeps it going. And Yeah, I am looking forward to, like I said, I'm definitely planning to come to the January show, but if I see it happen, if you guys pop up a performance before then, I will be getting my tickets. So thank you again, Elaina, Katie, and Andrea. We were so thankful to have you on the show. So glad to talk about this. And this was, again, great timing since we just did another episode where we were talking about grief. So this kind of is nice to have the two kind of almost back to back. And we would love to have you again anytime, or like I said, closer to January. If you want to pop on again, we'll have you on again. So, and listeners, check out our show notes. We'll have all the links for them. And also, Andrea, the moms, what is it? Moms Unhinged.
Moms Unhinged. Yeah.
That's the other comedy show, which you guys should probably check out, especially for your mom. You'll get it. I'm sure there will be every single moment through momhood.
Yeah, there's a little grief about children in there, but not quite the same. Well, definitely a lot lighter. So, but yeah, so I think, as far as this show goes, I would just tell people to get your tickets early. We have been selling out every single show lately, so that's great.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, thank you again, ladies. It was wonderful to have you.
Thank you both.
Of course.
Thank you for joining us today. To learn more about today's episode, visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you'll find additional links in our show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Your support helps others find our show and discover all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories.
You can also follow us on social media for cemetery facts, photos, quotes, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery. If you'd like to help support us financially, you can donate a cup of coffee by clicking on the coffee cup icon on our website or YouTube, or purchase some of our fabulous Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery merchandise through our store link.
Until we meet again.